When we talk about social challenges today, there is often a list of urgent issues that rightly command our attention: racial disparities, economic inequality, climate change, the rights of marginalized groups. But there's another group that paradoxically often slips out of focus: boys and men. Their struggles are real, significant, and measurable, but too often they remain invisible. There is a kind of cultural blind spot when it comes to the difficulties that many men face, and it's a blind spot we can no longer afford to ignore. The truth is that boys and men are facing profound headwinds in modern society. In education, the gap between boys and girls is stark and widening. In virtually every developed country, young women are more likely to graduate from high school, attend college, and complete advanced degrees. In fact, in the United States today, women now make up nearly 60% of college students. Boys are more likely to be suspended, more likely to be diagnosed with behavioral disorders, and less likely to receive positive feedback from teachers. From the very beginning of their educational journeys, boys are struggling. But because these struggles don't fit neatly into familiar narratives of disadvantage, they often go unaddressed. Mental health paints an equally concerning picture. Suicide rates for men are consistently higher than for women, often by a factor of 3 or 4. Men are less likely to seek help for depression, anxiety, or other emotional difficulties. Loneliness is a silent epidemic among men, particularly as they age, often fueled by weaker social connections and cultural norms that discourage vulnerability. These are not isolated statistics. They are threads in a larger tapestry of male struggle, woven across different dimensions of life. And yet, despite the mounting evidence, there is a deep reluctance to engage with these realities. And some fear that talking about men's struggles will somehow detract from the very real challenges that women still face. Others are concerned that acknowledging male vulnerability could be co-opted by reactionary movements. Still others simply don't know how to talk about it without feeling awkward, uncertain, or even guilty. As a result, the problems remain, and they worsened, largely unattended. One reason these issues remain so invisible is that many men themselves find it difficult to express their struggles. Our cultural scripts about masculinity teach boys early on to be stoic, to be tough, to handle things alone. Vulnerability is treated not as a sign of courage, but as a mark of weakness. So when boys fall behind at school, they often withdraw rather than seek help. When men feel isolated or depressed, they are more likely to suffer in silence than to reach out. This creates a vicious cycle. The less men talk about their struggles, the less visible those struggles become. The less visible they become, the less support is offered, and so the silence deepens. Another part of the challenge is that the conversation about gender has, for good reason, focused so heavily on the ways in which women and girls have been disadvantaged historically, and there is still work to do. But progress for women does not have to mean indifference to men. Care is not a finite resource. Compassion is not a zero-sum game. We have the capacity to care about more than one thing at once, to recognize and address the struggles of boys and men while continuing to champion gender equity for women and girls. In fact, if we truly believe in a society where everyone can thrive, then the struggles of half the population must be part of the conversation. Ignoring these struggles comes at a cost not just for the individuals directly affected, but for society as a whole. Young men who fall behind educationally are more likely to disengage from the labor market. Men who feel alienated or isolated are more vulnerable to extremist ideologies. Communities with large numbers of disconnected men often see declines in civic participation, higher rates of addiction, and greater social instability. In other words, this is not just a men's issue, it is a societal issue. When boys and men struggle, families struggle, communities struggle, and the nation struggle. It's important to emphasize that the goal here is not to cast men as victims or to wallow in grievance. It is simply to recognize reality, to allow ourselves to see clearly. It is to replace indifference with empathy, silence with dialogue, passivity with action. Boys and men, like all human beings, need support, guidance, encouragement, and understanding. They need permission to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to dream, and they need a society willing to see them not through a lens of suspicion or caricature, but through a lens of genuine human concern. The good news is that once we begin to look honestly at these issues, solutions are possible. Schools can adopt teaching methods that recognize different learning styles and developmental timelines for boys. Mental health services can be tailored to meet men where they are, using language and approaches that feel accessible rather than alienating. Workplaces can rethink policies to better support men in building balanced, meaningful lives. At the community level, new forms of mentorship, engagement, and connection can be cultivated to replace the social bonds that have frayed over time. None of this requires heroic leaps. It requires small but intentional acts of recognition and care. It begins by simply acknowledging that there is a problem, that male struggle is real, that male pain matters. Now, it begins by choosing to see what has too often been hidden in plain sight. It begins by extending the same compassion to boys and men that we rightly extend to other groups who are struggling, not out of charity, not out of pity, but out of a commitment to the dignity and flourishing of every person. In the end, the measure of a society's maturity is not how well it cares for its winners, but how well it notices and lifts those who are struggling. Boys and men are struggling. It's time we started paying attention. Caring about men's struggles is not a zero-sum game. This is one of the fundamental truths we have to grasp if we're going to have an honest conversation about the challenges facing boys and men today. It's tempting, particularly in a polarized environment, to believe that expressing concern for one group somehow diminishes the concern for another, as if compassion were a scarce resource to be rationed and fought over. But that's not how real social progress works. Compassion is not a pie. If I have a bigger slice, it doesn't mean you have a smaller one. In fact, the more compassion we cultivate, the more there is to go around. Yet when the topic of men's struggles is raised, the reaction is often defensive. People worry that to acknowledge the problems facing boys and men, lower rates of college graduation, higher rates of suicide, a growing sense of economic dislocation, is to somehow dismiss the real and ongoing issues facing women and girls. They worry that it will turn into a competition of grievances, a political tug of war where only one group can be lifted at a time. But this fear prevents us from seeing the reality in front of us, that we can and must hold multiple truths at once. We can celebrate the extraordinary progress that women have made over the last century, progress that was hard-won and long overdue, while also recognizing that some boys and men are struggling in ways that deserve our attention. One truth does not cancel out the other. It is not a betrayal of women's rights to care about men's mental health. It is not an attack on gender equality to ask why boys are falling behind in school. It is not anti-feminist to worry about the growing number of men who are disconnected from work, from family, from society itself. One of the measures of a mature society is its ability to extend empathy broadly, even when it feels uncomfortable or politically inconvenient. Empathy is not a partisan project, it's a human one. And empathy demands that we look honestly at the situation boys and men face today without rushing to minimize it or to weaponize it. Too often, when concerns about men are raised, they are met either with dismissal or with angry, populist energy that turns legitimate issues into political grenades. Neither response serves the boys growing up today. Neither response addresses the deeper cultural and economic currents shaping their lives. In education, we have known for decades that boys are more likely to struggle academically. They are more likely to be diagnosed with learning difficulties, more likely to drop out of high school, less likely to attend college, and less likely to graduate when they do. In higher education today, women make up nearly 60% of college students, a gap that has widened quietly and steadily, while most public discussions remain focused on the historic gaps where women were once underrepresented. We should still care deeply about areas where women continue to face obstacles. But why would that care preclude us from noticing that many boys are losing their way long before they even reach adulthood? The same is true in mental health. Suicide rates among men, particularly young and middle-aged men, are alarmingly high. Men are less likely to seek help, less likely to be diagnosed with depression, and more likely to die from substance abuse causes. Again, caring about these facts does not in any way negate our concern for women's health issues. It simply reflects a full and honest picture of the human condition today. If anything, a society that aspires to be truly humane must be attentive to all suffering wherever it is found. We also see this pattern in the economy. As traditional manufacturing jobs have disappeared, Many men without a college degree have found themselves adrift, struggling to find a place in a service-oriented economy that often demands different skills and different forms of self-presentation. For many, work was not just about a paycheck, it was about identity, dignity, and purpose. When that work disappears, something deeper is lost, not just to the individual, but to the broader social fabric. And once again, it is entirely possible to recognize the unique challenges faced by working-class men without dismissing the barriers that women and people of color continue to face in the labor market. Empathy for men must not be seen as a political move, but as a moral one. It's not about picking sides in some imagined battle of the sexes. It's about recognizing that if we allow a significant part of our population to drift into disengagement, despair, and alienation, we all suffer. It's about realizing that a society in which large numbers of young men feel disconnected and hopeless is a society that is sowing seeds of instability for everyone. We have a choice. We can continue to allow our compassion to be constrained by the narrow logic of political tribalism, where caring for one group is seen as betrayal of another, or we can expand our moral bandwidth. We can embrace a richer, more inclusive understanding of human flourishing, one that insists that every person's well-being matters, no matter their gender. We can learn to walk and chew gum at the same time, to advocate for women where they still face injustice, and advocate for men where they are struggling. There is, in the end, no downside to caring more. No society has ever weakened itself by being more compassionate, more attentive, more honest about its challenges. If anything, it is through this kind of wide-armed empathy that we find our greatest strength. If we are willing to care about the struggles of boys and men, not in opposition to anyone else, but alongside them, we will be taking a crucial step toward a healthier, more stable, and more just society. And if we can't find it in our hearts to care simply because it's the right thing to do, then perhaps we should care because the alternative is too dangerous to ignore. In education, in work, and in mental health, young men and boys are struggling, and without intentional action, these gaps will not close on their own. They will grow wider. And the cost of that widening will not be borne by men alone. It will be borne by all of us. Because when a large part of any society feels left behind, disconnected and disenfranchised, the consequences ripple outward across families, communities, and even the very fabric of democracy itself. Consider education first. Across almost every developed country, including here, the gap in educational attainment between girls and boys has widened dramatically. In the United States, for example, 2/3 of the students at the top of high school graduating classes are girls. Women now earn almost 60% of bachelor's degrees. And even more strikingly, the gap grows larger at the postgraduate level. In reading and writing, girls are on average almost a full grade level ahead of boys by the age of 15. These are not minor differences. They are profound, systemic, and largely unattended to. But it is not just about academic performance. It is about engagement, a sense of purpose and hope. Boys are more likely to be suspended from school, more likely to be held back a grade, and more likely to drop out entirely. They are less likely to enroll in college, and even when they do, they are less likely to graduate. The education system, while making extraordinary progress in supporting girls, and rightly so, has failed to evolve in ways that meet the changing needs of boys. And the result is not just a set of troubling statistics, it is a generation of young men losing faith in the path they have been told to walk. That disengagement doesn't end with school, it follows them into the labor market. One of the starkest trends of the last few decades is the steady withdrawal of men from the workforce. Millions of prime-age men, those between 25 and 54, are neither working nor looking for work. This is not a small group, it is roughly 1 in 9 men in this age range. A society in which millions of men are idle, not studying, not working, not training, is a society in trouble. And the reasons for this disengagement are complex. Some of it has to do with economic shifts, the decline of traditional blue-collar jobs that once provided stable employment for men without a college degree. Some of it is about health, especially the rise of chronic pain and the explosion of opioid addiction. And some of it, crucially, is about purpose. Work is not just about a paycheck, it is about identity, dignity, and belonging. When men lose their connection to the workforce, they often lose far more than their income. They lose a central pillar of their sense of self. And we see the toll of that loss in the mental health statistics. Men are less likely to seek help for mental health issues. They are less likely to talk about feelings of depression, anxiety, or despair. That they are more likely to act on those feelings in the most tragic of ways. The suicide rate for men is almost 4 times higher than for women. Among middle-aged men, especially those who are economically struggling, deaths of despair, deaths from suicide, drug overdoses, and alcohol illnesses have surged. This is not an isolated crisis. It is a cascading one. Boys fall behind in school and then struggle to find their footing in work. Men drift out of the labor market and into isolation. The social bonds that tie people to their communities fray. Frustration builds. Trust in institutions erodes. In that void, anger and resentment can take root, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, but always dangerously. The struggles of women, quite the opposite. True equality demands that we care about everyone's challenges, even, and perhaps especially, when they do not fit neatly into our existing political narratives. We must create new pathways for boys and men to thrive in a world that is different from the one their fathers and grandfathers knew. We must rethink how schools engage boys, recognizing that they often learn differently and may need different kinds of support. We must rebuild a labor market that offers dignity and purpose to men at all levels of education. We must destigmatize conversations about male mental health, making it clear that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength. And we must speak honestly about fatherhood, about mentorship, about role models. The absence of fathers from too many children's lives is both a cause and a consequence of these broader male struggles. Boys need to see what responsible, loving manhood looks like. They need to know that their masculinity is not inherently toxic, but can be a force for tremendous good for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. There are no quick fixes, no silver bullets, but there is a path forward if we are willing to walk it together. It begins with a simple but powerful act of paying attention, listening, caring, offering our boys and men not just judgment or critique, but also hope and support. Because when men are flourishing, women flourish too, children flourish, communities flourish, we all do. When we talk about men's struggles, it's not enough to just diagnose the symptoms, falling educational outcomes, higher suicide rates, growing loneliness. We also have to ask, what vision are we offering boys and men? What kind of masculinity are we encouraging them to aspire to? And the truth is, we are not offering a compelling, positive path forward. In many ways, we've left them standing at a crossroads with outdated maps in their hands and no clear direction about where to go next. For too long, the dominant model of masculinity was a brittle one. It was about stoicism to the point of silence, strength without vulnerability, success measured only in terms of status or material wealth. The old script told men that their value lay in how much they could provide, how much they could protect, and how little they revealed of their inner lives. And for many generations, that script seemed sufficient, at least on the surface. But today, that model is collapsing. The economy no longer rewards muscle over mental agility. Family life demands emotional presence, not just financial provision. Friendships and community thrive on communication, not just quiet endurance. And yet, while that old model is breaking down, we haven't built a new one robust enough to replace it. Instead, many boys and young men are left with a false binary. Either cling to outdated notions of toughness and dominance or reject masculinity altogether. Neither choice is healthy, neither prepares them for the demands of modern life, and neither honors the simple, profound truth that being a man, like being a woman, is a human experience, full of complexity, requiring adaptation and growth. We have to offer a new model of masculinity, one that is both strong and sensitive, ambitious and nurturing, resilient and emotionally open. A model that allows boys to dream of being fathers, teachers, nurses, and artists with the same pride as they might dream of being engineers, athletes, or entrepreneurs. A model where caring for others is not a betrayal of manhood, but an affirmation of it. A model that sees emotional literacy as a strength, not a weakness. This isn't about telling boys and men that they are broken. It's about telling them they are needed, deeply, urgently, and in ways that go far beyond old stereotypes. Society needs men who are capable of being supportive partners, engaged fathers, dependable friends, and responsible citizens. We need men who are comfortable in their own skin, who can express their emotions in healthy ways, who can find purpose in relationships as much as in careers. Importantly, this new vision of masculinity must come from a place of respect, not disdain. Too often, conversations about men and boys are framed in a way that feels critical or even contemptuous. And when that happens, many men understandably retreat. They hear criticism where they crave guidance. They hear blame where they seek belonging. And so they either tune out or lash out. Neither response brings us closer to the society we want to build. If we want men to step into a new role, we have to invite them, not shame them. We have to recognize their value even as we ask them to grow. We have to speak to their potential, not just their failures. And we have to meet them where they are, not where we wish they were. Education is a critical part of this. From the earliest stages, boys need to see models of masculinity that are expansive, not restrictive. They need to see that being brave includes being vulnerable, that leadership includes listening, that strength includes compassion. They need to be taught not just how to win, but how to connect, not just how to endure, but how to heal. Schools, communities, and families all have a role to play in painting a fuller picture of what it means to be a man. Policy matters too. We must design systems that support male engagement across all spheres of life. Fatherhood programs that help dads stay involved in their children's lives. Education reforms that address the specific ways boys learn and grow. Mental health initiatives that speak directly to the experiences of men, removing stigma and encouraging openness. Economic policies that recognize the changing nature of work and support men's ability to find purpose and dignity, even as traditional industries fade away. But policy alone won't solve this. At the heart of it, we are talking about culture, about the stories we tell, the expectations we set, the examples we elevate. Every movie, every classroom, every workplace conversation, every family dinner is a chance to show boys and men that their full humanity is welcome and needed. Every moment is an opportunity to broaden the definition of what it means to be a good man. And we should celebrate the men who mentor quietly behind the scenes, the ones who build community without seeking glory, the fathers who rearrange their lives to be present, the friends who reach out when someone is struggling. These are the models of modern manhood we need to lift up. These are the examples that remind us masculinity at its best is not about dominance. It's about contribution. It's important to say this clearly. Masculinity itself is not the problem, just as femininity is not the problem. The problem is the narrow, rigid, outdated versions of these identities that no longer serve us. We need to release men from the old cages without asking them to deny who they are. We need to help them forge new paths without suggesting that their instincts for protection, provision, strength, or ambition are somehow toxic by nature. They are not. They are only dangerous when left unexamined, untempered by empathy, and unshaped by shared values. Boys and men deserve a sense of purpose that feels authentic, not performative.